Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, February 16th, and this is Senate Education. Pleased to have everyone watching with us. Committee, we are going to start the day by hearing from Mr. Desmarais, who has been kind enough to take some of the wording that we have all worked on and drafted a letter that we will try to get to Senate appropriations by Friday. Let me update you a little bit on my conversation with Senator Kitchell and Senator Ballant yesterday. It looks like a number of our requests that we've talked about should be in the expedited budget, if you will. So not the big bill, but because of timing and because of need, Senator Kitchell recommends that we consider recommending that they put dollars for literacy, for summer programs, and for higher education access in this next budget round. What I did, I know I emailed everyone sort of the talking points that I shared with Senators Kitchell and Ballant yesterday. And then what I did was I played a little bit with the language and sent it along to Jim. And he has worked out just a basic draft of what we will possibly a version of what we'll end up sending to Senator Kitchell. Senator Perchlik, just jumping on, I just want to let you know that what Senator Kitchell has asked us to do is to forward a letter outlining some of our priorities with dollar amounts, not for the big bill, but for this expedited budget that is going to come up. My hope is to get it to her by Friday. I took the language that I shared with all of you and switched it around a little bit based on the conversations that I had with Senators Kitchell and Ballant. And I think generally, met with completely open and willing to push ahead on those three fronts at this point, which again would be making certain students have, a good, healthy, productive, restorative summer, and making certain that we provide kind of continue the McClure Foundation work, but broaden it, open it up to all state colleges, Vermont Tech, and also open up who should be able to take advantage of that. And then finally, as it relates to literacy, well, let me go back to the summer programs. One of the reasons to get this in that expedited budget is so that parents and summer programs can both plan. And then with regard to literacy, get it started now, allow teachers to take advantage of the dollars that we are going to make accessible in the school districts. So, so that's where we're at. We're going to have now, let's see, Jim take us through a draft letter, but we'll have it go to appropriations. Right now, I think it says it's for me, but we'll change that. We'll have it from everyone. And at least everybody that agrees to what we're doing. And then we'll try to get it to them by Friday. So that's where we're at. Anybody have any questions before Jim starts out? Okay, so Jim, do you want to take us through the letter? I believe it should be, Jeannie, I don't know if you have it yet, if it's on our website.
I have it, and it is on our website.
Great. So everybody want to follow along from there? Jim, does that make most sense to you?
Sure, that's fine. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Turn it over to you.
So, good afternoon. So, for the record, Jim Desmarais, Legislative Counsel. We are looking at your letter to appropriations, the draft of it. It's for the next round of appropriations. And just reading through it, it's from, at this point, Sarah Campion, writing on behalf of the Education Committee to make three areas of requests. The first is in the area of supporting students and families that they have a safe, restorative summer, and one that assists students in transitioning back to school and address the deficit. So in that first category, there is 500,000 requests to support collaboration between AOE and the Department of Health to educate parents on the signs of depression and suicide, and to provide information and resources for assistance. Second, a request.
Actually, Jim, if we could just stop there, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's just take a look at that. So everyone knows, and this is something I think Senator Lyons in particular might want to weigh in on. That number is a starting point. That's something that really I just put in there, joint fiscal and others can give us greater specificity this week. And in a way, that 500,000, for lack of a better expression, is a placeholder and one just to get things started. So I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about that, but we will hear more from those two departments. We'll hear from the Agency of Education after this, and we'll also hear from Joint Fiscal and hopefully get that number a little bit more accurate. Okay.
Okay. All right. Secondly, to direct $500,000 to the Agency of Education and Department of Health to make certain that children and families have access to nutritious foods throughout the summer. Third, to direct the Agency of Education to instruct districts and supervisory unions to address the needs of students who have been truant during the pandemic and begin to recreate a supportive school culture. So
right there, if you don't mind, Jim, I didn't put any dollar amount. Again, we'll be hearing from the Agency of Education right after this. And there might be dollars that they believe they're going to need to work with these families and individuals, or it might just be part of their regular budget. Okay, thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Senator Lyons, please.
So I don't know how to ask this question, but since we do have concerns about truancy and other students leaving schools for one reason or another, are we recreating a supportive school culture, or are we ensuring the creation of? So I don't know. I don't want to insult anybody in the process.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
Yeah.
Uh,
We could just say ensure that there is, or ensure a supportive school culture, rather than trying to recreate it. I don't want to recreate something if it's not hasn't.
Yeah,
been
no,
there.
I think it's an important point. And Jim, what we're trying to capture here is from testimony. We're trying to bring students and families back into the fold, if you will. People have been absent. We have a number of families in every district that have been ghosted, or I don't even know how to use that word. I don't even know if it's a verb. And maybe somebody younger on the committee knows how to help you with that. Perchlik, maybe. And schools have been going around and driving to families and finding and talking with families. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to make sure that on the truancy issue, it's, those families are identified and assisted and get the support that they need and deserve. So maybe you can help us with the language there a little bit
Okay.
in another draft.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, number 4 is to request $500,000 for universal after-school grants to provide grants for children to attend summer and after-school programs.
Okay, now, thank you. I just want to look to Senator Perchlik on this. I thought I had changed it a little bit and put some different language in there, Jim, but I may not have sent you one after I talked or received information from Senator Perchlik. So Senator Perchlik, how should that be worded given your experience?
Thank you, Senator. This looks like it was changed from what you sent me before.
Yes, I'm sorry, it is. The grants, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Because that program's already up and running. You know, they thought, well, it's not up and running. The grants are working, but they don't have any money to do more grants. And some of those are summer programs. So the only thing I wondered if we wanted to have them focus more on summer instead of after school coming. But I think often the same people that do summer programs do after school programs. I noticed Holly's on our agenda today.
Yeah.
She's the one that ran the program. So we could, if we wanted to have any more information, we could talk to her directly. But no, I'm really appreciative of the way this is worded and really glad to see it in here.
Do you have any recommendations, Senator Perchlik, on the amount? I mean, I know, no, and I mean, you've been in these kinds of conversations. What's that?
5 million.
So we,
I don't know. It's
I know.
hard.
No, I get it. And this is where we'll look to the agency, we'll look to Holly, we'll look to others to see if we can get a sense of what, the best dollar amount is. But, one of the this isn't the right message. Well, in meetings on Friday afternoon with Joint Fiscal, there are a lot of funds available. And so, whether it's for education, health and welfare, whatever the committee, given what the feds have already sent and given what might be coming in, this is where I'd rather shoot a little high and have approps rein us in if need be. So.
Yeah, we could, and I can either talk to Holly and others. I mean, the after school task force is working right now towards a report. So we have a good group to bounce that question off of.
Great. Thank you, Jim, if you don't mind continuing.
Okay, we're on 5. So 5th is to address the shortage of teachers and mental health professionals by streamlining the licensure process and bringing retired teachers back into classrooms.
Again, something that we'll look to the agency on and others, but this I put in there, it may need some wordsmithing, but again, trying to address these shortages. The other thing I should mention is, when I look at some of the investments we're trying to make, there's this pot of one-time funds, and then there is we need to start talking about long-term as it relates to even scholarship. For example, everything we've talked about in this is really the short term, the 1 to 3 years. But what are we going to be doing to really put in systems so that the agency, so in a few years, we're continuing to train teachers on literacy so that we continue to or start to a real process where our teachers and mental health professionals can get some relief from student debt, that kind of thing. Senator Hooker.
Before we leave this section,
Please.
so if you're finished with your thoughts on
Yes,
that last piece, okay, I just want to go back to the nutrition and foods and wondered how that's going to intersect with everybody eats.
Right.
And will this be added on to that?
That's a great question, and I think we should have them in. And I'll also talk to Senator Kitchell a little bit. This might be something that in some ways they are already planning, but to address. But I figured we would just keep it in the letter so that we don't lose sight of it.
And with regard to number 5,
yes,
I know that there are bills coming out. I hope will be coming out for loan forgiveness. So
Yeah.
that again is a long-term
Yeah.
process. And I hope that we'll take a look at that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And that's your bill, correct?
It is. And
Yeah.
I just got a something of a fiscal note on it. So I'll share that with
So
you.
I would encourage you and others, we can think about this in two ways. We could, it seems to me that we could advocate and ask for one-time funds for
Mhm.
teachers and mental health professionals to relieve their student debt, but there has to be a commitment somehow in order for them to stay, you know?
And that's what this bill is.
Great.
And
Great.
it would, but I'm thinking, you mentioned the short term and the long term. I
Yeah.
see this easing of licensure requirements in the process as kind of a short term thing, because once that's in place, and it doesn't cost a lot to do that, I hope.
Right.
But allowing people to come back into the profession and ease the workforce problem now. But as far as going further, going into the future, I think that we need to do something a little more dramatic.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that
and
people-
that's what I guess I'll look to you for you to add to this. If you want us to put this in a letter, do you want us to use or try to get roughly, again, the $500,000 place mark to say, we want teacher and mental health professional relief that would be use some of those one-time funds and create a system where those individuals that might come to the state would need to stay in the state, for a certain period of time. So that's just something for you to think about, and maybe come back to us if you want to take part of your bill and incorporate it in any way going forward. It just, it could make sense, or you might find that this is more of not a one-term funding source need, but it's more of a long-term, big bill annual budgetary need.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was thinking. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
So, can I add into that?
You bet.
I think the latter is probably better. I think having short-term funds is great, and it will kickstart things we may learn from that experience. But I think the bill that Senator Hooker has put in also has promise for some long-term access to new workforce. So,
I think you're
yeah.
inclined to.
Because I see this one. This is not a lot of dollars that we're looking at for
Right.
any one of these things. We know that each one is going to dovetail with something else that's going on, so I look at nutritious foods,
Yeah.
and we know that the food shelf and all the other programs that are in the state are going to be working to do this as well. But this at least gives us a start. So
Yeah.
no, and they're all good things, no question about it. Maybe we should ask for a lot more money.
Well, that is, again, one of the possibilities that we may find as we take testimony that some of these, warrant more funds. Okay, Jim.
Okay, so we've been through the first category. The second category is to improve access to higher education. And what's being requested is to expand the McClure Foundation's successful work last year with an investment of $1 million to provide a free class this summer or fall at any of the Vermont state colleges for high school seniors and any Vermont resident who is seeking to transition to a new career or to enhance their work or academic skills.
So just some background there. I got the sense from both Senators Kitchell and Ballant to expand it. Of course, if you're living in Johnson, might be that Johnson is going to be the closest spot for you to go for a class. If you're living in Bennington, probably not going to drive to Castleton, but CCV is the right spot. And of course, then there are online courses in needs. I think 1 million might be lowballing, given that I think the McClure Foundation spent about $600,000, and we would be opening it up to, everyone that is looking to, again, transition in some way to new work, a new skill, or enhance, some of the skills that they have. So it's broad. And so I am inclined to think that that would go up, and we can work with some of our partners to get more of an accurate number there. But I think it could make a big difference. Yeah, Senator Perchlik.
Yeah, I wondered if just what the thinking was. I think this is great, but I wondered about, well, one, I assume it's because it's one-time money, so you don't want to do something like that VSAC suggested with the 802 opportunities where it would be an ongoing obligation. But even with that, I wondered if there was any discussion about, expanding it to 2 classes or something, but making it income qualified. Or is that just too complicated? The goal is to make it as simple, like we heard, which was what the McClure Foundation liked.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think there are 2 things happening here. There's the trying to reach middle and low income Vermonters, while also trying to support our institutions of higher ed by allowing it, kind of opening it up. And so in some ways, they'll get kind of a maximum benefit if everybody's involved. But I think your point's well taken. I'd be happy to direct it more specifically if that's the way the committee wants to move in. But I think some of the thinking around keeping it this way simple, it's going to help everybody, because you're going to get just a lot of different people at a lot of different ages going and taking advantage of this opportunity. And you're right, it doesn't get at the VSAC proposal, which I think we as a committee should have a look at after we take a more careful look at after we get this sort of off of our plate and say, all right, these are some of the things that we're going to do with these one-time funds. Senator Hooker. You're muted, Senator.
Sorry.
No problem.
These one-time funds would be good for the next 2 or 3 years. Is that so?
Yeah, and honestly,
I'm looking
Senator,
at the million and thinking, that's 1 year's worth,
right.
And then, maybe we should look at it that way. But how do we, do this again? Going back to Senator Perchlik's idea of income sensitivity, I'm not sure that that's not a good idea. So maybe we could discuss that more. But the idea that if this is going to go on for 3 years, then we probably need more money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think everyone will have Steve Klein and Catherine Benham in to review our work. And hopefully they'll give us a better idea, Senator, of what they mean exactly by some of it's 1 year, some of it's 2. We could stretch some of it out by 3. I think they're still getting their heads around it also. And so when they come in, hopefully we can tighten some of that up, and we'll be able to figure out if we can sort of pace some of this in a way. Or are they meaning that it needs to be used in 3 years, but given, right away, that kind of thing. So I think there's still some gray area that hopefully we'll get answers to. And I think Senator Perchlik, I absolutely agree with his comment. We could, again, having left Catherine and Steve on Friday, I thought it was going to be kind of doom and gloom, and I left feeling a little bit like it was Christmas morning, in that there are real funds out there now and will be coming. So I think if there are ideas that we want to put in here, particularly for the expedited funds, we should do it. And then there is also the possibility that we wait. Senator Hooker.
I was going to say that the only problem I would have with just opening it up is that, once the funds are gone, they're gone. And if part of our goal is to get lower income students involved, they may be blocked out by virtue of the timing. So, that's my concern.
Yeah. And my only thought on that, of course, as much as we can do for middle and low income Vermonters, I agree with. Looking at what the McClure Foundation did, it was interesting. In a way, they got a lot of people, but in a way, they only got, and granted, some of it was the timing, and we're addressing some of the timing now by doing this in the expedited bill rather than waiting until May with the big bill, and then everybody's sort of shuffling. So maybe what we do is we work in language that says, focus these dollars toward low and middle income Vermonters and make sure people are marketing to those groups. Again, if you're coming from a household with an income of $250,000, you do have options. And if you're coming from a household, I'd say even of combined household income of $75,000, $80,000, with two children, those options are limited. So I do like that idea. And is it the committee's wish then for us to rework some of this language now and really direct it to our middle and low income Vermonters, these one-time funds? Senator Perchlik's a yes. Do you want to say something, Senator Perchlik?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I think it would be great. And I think, especially if there's enough money to do more than one class, because I think that the goal is to get more, to support the state's system, but also to get some of these students that might not have gone to college to go. And I think it was a good program and got some people to try it out. But if we could, give them more than one class to those low-income folks instead of giving it to everybody, that's definitely a preference of mine.
I like it. No, I do. Senator Lyons.
So how this is all coordinated will be important. I think it's I think it's really a good idea to try to capture the low income kids and the first time at college low income kids. They're the ones who really need this. So then, because it's being opened up to all of the institutions, how it's coordinated will be important. And, I don't know, whoever's doing it will do a good job, I think. So I'm not going to worry about all of the detailed administration of it, but having some income criterion I don't think will hurt at all.
And I'm hoping, since it is in the expedited bill, they'll have time to get ready for that influx. Senator Chittenden.
I just want to build on Senator Perchlik's comment. I too think it would be great especially for the lower income students to have access to more than just one course, but I'd add a caveat to that. And I'd say it'd be great if it was like one free course a year. I just think of ways to get that. This really helps them get acclimated to the process of registering for classes and what the classroom is like. And a way to keep them on track, so to speak, is to say, we'll give you one class free a year. So if they want to take longer, they can, but if they start to see the benefit, they can accelerate more. It's a way like rewards programs can often work, where you'll get, a bunch of rewards every year or so to keep you in the program. So I'm all for expanding the accessibility of these resources for students, especially on the lower income. I just think it's nice to pace it out over multiple years.
I'll let someone else respond to that, not having ever received an award growing up. Is there somebody else that, Senator Lyons, you strike me as having had a more successful academic childhood than I.
What's the question? Did I get an award?
No, the question is, and I think that some of this will have to be settled by joint fiscal. Should we pace this out, or should we say, listen, you're graduating or you're going back to school, you're coming from a family, a household income, you're on your own, you're making $25,000. Do we want to give you one course per term, or do we want you to enroll? Like literally get the ball rolling. My instincts say enroll, just that's where I am. Take 2 or 3 classes, see what it's like. These funds, again, we'll have to determine even if funds would be available, the following year. But thinking that these are one-time funds, get your 3 classes in and work to build off of it. Work with your advisor, work with the financial aid office. I feel like, in a way, if you've got those 3 classes, you've walked out with, doing pretty good work. You might be ready to, again, take those next steps. Senator Lyons.
No, I agree with you on that. One course is nice, but it doesn't give the whole flavor for the college and what it can mean.
Okay. Senator Perchlik.
And if we have time, maybe we can hear from BSAC or one of the colleges that are dealing with these students, and maybe they'd say, like, this is our experience, like,
yeah,
whether one or more they might have some real world advice for us on that.
Yep. Great. Great. Senator Hooker.
I was going to say the same thing, because there are people who, might take this as an opportunity just to see if college is something that they can handle.
Yeah.
If college is something that they want to pursue. So I don't know whether we can put it in so that it's either or.
What do you
And
mean?
I would say, one course a semester or something.
I was thinking, again, we'll hear from joint fiscal, but if these are one-time funds and they say, listen, these real, these particular ones for higher ed have to be used right away, I think we just say, go for the gold, take 2 or 3 classes and that first term, and just feel like you've got this college experience and something that you can build off of. If all of a sudden they say, no, you could spread this out over the next 3 years, then we can rework things. But for now, I think, we try to put in there something around, and we can work with VSAC, but who are we really directing these funds to? And I'm thinking families with household incomes of $75,000 and less, and also thinking that, allowing them to take up to 3 classes. I mean, the reason I put 75 in there and not 50 is, 50s, probably our most neediest Vermonters, but, a lot of those students can also pull from Pell Grants and other things. I think I remember some testimony where people said, it's the $75,000, $80,000 combined household income that sounds pretty good if you don't have any children and, you're kind of doing your thing. But $75,000 to $80,000 combined household income, that's when kids are really, some parents might have some of their own college debt left over. They're trying to balance things out. And I think open it up to that group is important. Senator Lyons.
So I was just going back to thinking about the number of courses, and I think there will be some self-selection. A lot of these kids are going to be working, and they're going to be working full time, regardless of how much tuition support they get.
Yeah.
So so in my experience, there is some self-selection, but on the other hand, the institutions that we're talking about have very strong support systems. So if they're going to be wrapping their arms around these kids, there's no question about it. So
which is great. Yeah.
I think let it play out.
Yeah, I think it's some real exciting possibilities. And likely we'll have to increase that amount. Senator Perchlik.
I think a key question is whether this is the last dollar or more like the foundation program where they didn't worry about that, because that adds complexity. So for those families that already get a full ride, you just say, don't worry about it. We're just going to make this free, and the state just get billed directly from the state colleges, or is it like a last dollar grant for that student? You know what I mean?
Would you say something more about that? Because I do remember this conversation. Give me an example.
So there's either first dollar or last dollar. I don't know if there's a middle. I don't know if there's a middle dollar program, but the last dollar just kind of leverages any other grants or assistance that they can get. So to make it still free, but this program would just pay whatever's left after all the other, programs that are funded. And but it's more complicated, because then you have to say, okay, what else can this one student get? And then you say, okay, what's left? We'll pay that. What the McClure Foundation says, we're not going to get into that. We're just going to, community colleges is going to tell us how many people are in the class, and we're going to pay 100% of it and not have to try to jump through those hoops. So maybe if you're trying to spend the money quicker and simpler, you just say it's first dollar and it's 100%. But if you're trying to make it last longer and leverage more, then you would make it last dollar.
Yeah, I'm inclined to make it first dollar, spend it, get it.
Right.
But
and like you had said, we don't need to figure it out today, right? So if we could kind of get some advice from VSAC and others.
VSAC, yeah, I'll try to get VSAC in maybe even tomorrow. I know that Dr. Boucher is eager to testify, which I certainly appreciate. So let's just look at this last one, Jim, if you don't mind, and then we'll shift to get Dr. Boucher's thoughts, and then go from there.
Okay, so the last category is to approve literacy. So first of all, it observes that the SBAC test taken every year by students in grade 3 through 8. Only 50% of third graders were deemed proficient in 2019. And that proficiency percentage is between 50 and 57% for the remaining grades. And the request is for appropriation of $500,000 for the Agency of Education to distribute funds to school districts and SUs for literacy training for teachers.
Yeah, this is something we've had a long conversations about, and unless somebody has any immediate questions, comments, or edits, we'll let Dr. Boucher from the agency start to weigh in a little bit with the agency, her thoughts and the agency's thoughts on this work, as well as other general thoughts moving forward as it relates to a post-summer or post-COVID life for our youngest Vermonters. Okay, Dr. Boucher, I do apologize. The committee, some people are saying it's the brightest group. I tend to agree with that. So there are a lot of questions, lots of good energy.
No apologies necessary,
right.
Chair Campion. I truly was a little confused.
Yeah.
So I have not I'm happy to talk about these ideas, but I have not had a chance to review the document that you're talking about. So what I came today to,
sorry to interrupt. We sent it to Secretary French, and I believe he had written back that he was going to be here today to testify on it, but that might not be the case.
I apologize. Yes, he actually he got pulled into another, I think perhaps a meeting with the governor. So I apologize. So that's part of the confusion. It's on our part. But what I wanted to share is what we're planning and will be doing around recovery from COVID. And
Sure.
I think that you will be hopefully pleased with much of it, because I think that there's significant overlap in terms of what you've all been discussing and talking about and sort of chewing on already this afternoon. So for the record, Dr. Heather Boucher, Deputy Secretary for Education. And I am going to go ahead and share my screen because Jeannie has wonderfully been able to set that up. Can everyone see that? Yes? Okay. Yes, folks can see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So this committee certainly knows that in our Constitution, the state bears responsibility to ensure equitable access for all of our children. And in terms of the document that you were just reviewing, that's very clear that a lot of that, if not all of those points, were directly relevant to this issue. So as a result of what we've experienced around the COVID pandemic response, we're really concerned about existing equity gaps and that they may have widened. We also are very curious about and also anticipate that the impact of the pandemic on students will likely relate to and vary depending on the region of the state that we're talking about, depending on the existing community resources and characteristics, obviously before the pandemic, will also depend on the quality of the remote learning, the hybrid learning, the in-person implementation, all of which, there was no standard, as you know, for each of these particular paradigms other than for the LEA to stand them up under an emergency order. And then also student and family characteristics and your points that you were talking about covered much of those. The other thing I would say is that we have to keep in mind, because we keep hearing it from educators in particular, that some students have actually excelled in the novel education paradigms that are occurring. We don't know the extent to which that intersects with equity gaps, and my hunch is that it will. And so it is important for us to know and to acknowledge that some students have excelled. I would argue if the students who have excelled were the students who were already privileged, then that's important to know. But I think it again reifies that we need to really make sure we're attending to our most vulnerable students as we move forward. We don't know that, though. It's possible that some students of more underserved populations have excelled. One example I'm thinking of is some students who had social anxiety about school. We have heard that many students are really joyous about remote and hybrid learning because their social anxiety about having to show up to school has gone away because they no longer have that as an issue. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, so when we're talking about education recovery, just to clarify what the Agency of Education has in mind, it's really to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on a variety of different outcomes, and I'll talk about those in just a sec. There are 3 key domains that we're going to hold our local systems accountable for in a way that we want them to pay specific attention to them, each of these domains, do a needs assessment in them, and then make some decisions about how they're going to address those by the spring. Sorry about this. My arrows are not working really well, so I apologize. Huh. Okay, sorry. I was clicking on the wrong type of arrow and it just wouldn't move. So this is our conceptual model for recovery that I was just mentioning. So there are 3 buckets that we're going to require our local education agencies, that is our districts, and then the schools that are part of those districts, to really focus on: mental health and well-being, re-engagement and truancy, and then, of course, academic success and achievement. And so some of this you may have heard talking about pieces of this. For instance, a few weeks ago, there was a lot of discussion of learning loss, and that's important. But many of us who are in the field or who know this area pretty well, as many of you do, understand that you can't really talk about learning loss and just focus on that. You actually have to make sure that students are socially, emotionally healthy, they're mentally healthy, and they have, functional overall good well-being. Likewise, as Chairman Campion, you had mentioned, there's a separate, which we think is a separate but related topic that needs significant attention, which is just the aspect that you were talking about, so-called ghosting, ghost students. And truancy really is on a continuum. So what we've seen so far, or hear about, I would say, so far, is a continuum of disengagement. So this might look at one level like students are not as passionate about completing their homework, they're not paying as much attention in either their in-person classes or in their remote learning paradigms. Or it could be as extreme as they are just completely disengaged. No one can get in contact with the family. That's when I think you're seeing kind of creative out-of-the-box solutions, as you mentioned, Chairman Campion, around who is actually physically going out to see if they can actually locate students. One anecdote that I also find interesting to keep in mind is that for some students, particularly some of our more vulnerable students in high school, I'm thinking, so some students are not showing up for kind of regularly scheduled, let's just say a math exam And when folks try to understand what's going on, it's that the student is actually working. So the student is actually working a part-time job because both parents have lost their jobs and there's no one who can actually keep food on the table. So we need a system moving forward that can actually acknowledge that we're still in a pandemic. And if we're expecting all students to kind of fit that one size fits all model, that's actually failing them the most. So for instance, if a student has the choice of, I'm going to go into my 1 p.m. In-person math class because that's all that's offered, or I'm getting a lot of pressure from my parents because my younger brothers and sisters don't have anything to eat this week. Obviously, the choice they're going to make is something about much more basic needs. So I think we want to just continue to think about that as we move forward. So with this conceptualization, we don't consider any three of these buckets as more important or more central or more critical than the other. They're clearly all related. And we expect that school systems, districts will actually design some interventions that get at more than one of these. We also anticipate that some districts will actually perhaps look better or worse than some of these buckets than others. And that will be part of their individualized recovery plan that we'll be requesting they complete. Should I wait until questions at the end?
Does anybody have any questions as we go through this? If I may, and you may be getting to this, I'll be eager around to see how we as a committee, in terms of oversight, should be measuring success of the agency and evaluating whether or not certain things were accomplished, how well they were accomplished. And the other piece, and this might be something that you might need to get back to us on, is now having seen the memo that we're drafting, what is the agency's position on the dollar amounts? Are there things that you would include, take out, increase, decrease? And I think, for example, when we talked about the issue of truancy, we left that blank. That might be something where the agency believes some kind of one-time funds are needed.
Yeah, just as an aside, I actually was starting to do some work on truancy well before the pandemic took root, because we have some pretty outdated statute on truancy. So I'd love to come back when we're not in COVID and talk about some of the more sustained work we need to do. A lot of that has to do with aligning processes better between education, DCF, and even mental health. Because you may be aware so Title 16 has very limited information on absences, and that's what schools and districts have to go by in terms of how they look at truancy. The DCF in their core title has a piece that's more about CHINs, children in need of supervisions. And so they don't really speak well to each other, those two pieces of statute. And in my view, and in a lot of folks' view, it's a system now that has become pretty broken in a lot of areas. There's huge gaps in terms of who is actually doing what, like who's on first, kind of. So, and then that's also, I would argue, that's from a very legally almost punitive system. And I think we're all in agreement, and it sounded like from your comments earlier, that the way out of a longstanding truancy problem is not to send families to court necessarily. It's to really build these wraparound services that get students engaged in a way that makes them want to come to school, makes them want to do well, and so on and so forth. So I'm happy to come and talk about that at any time as well. But today, I just want to be focused. That's actually, though, why this is one of our core areas in the recovery planning as well.
Right.
So I'm not sure if the committee has taken any testimony yet on sort of like what's happening in terms of student outcomes. If so, I might blast through this part, but if not, I could kind of walk through a few of these, which are probably pretty important.
So are these early indications that are being seen?
Yes.
Witnessed at this point? So it is, okay. So these are things that are happening. So I think it would be good to review these.
Yeah. but I think that's a great point. So it's more anecdote than actual data. Although on the mental health side, my email inbox was blowing up this morning because there are a handful now of new reports coming out from Vermont data actually supporting a lot of this stuff that's been anecdote. And I'll make sure that the committee gets those reports if that's of interest to you. So had been hearing about an increase in anxiety and depression. It had already been on the rise, particularly in our adolescents before COVID-19, and we're seeing a much an even increased slope in what that looks like right now. There has been an increase in 504 plans, which are I don't know if folks on the committee would know the distinction between those and an IEP. So an individualized education plan is for students who have a special education designation, so that they would get accommodations under IDEA. 504 plans are more of a general education, but they're in use if a student has a disability. A common example is an emotional disturbance, and that would also include something like anxiety or depression. And so it's, again, a way to get accommodations for students. It's a little bit of a different path to get there. There has to be a disability that has an impact on education. So it's slightly different than a special education paradigm. There has been an increase in emergency room visits by young people for mental health. These first four actually are pretty much now, there's data now coming out. Sarah Squirrel has some report out that actually has the data on these. And there's an increase in designated agency caseload for school-aged clients. This is all since, this time last year. So it's looking at 2019 to 2020. Now we're in 2021, but it's really looking at 2020 data. We also have to keep in mind the impact of the pandemic and required response on adults in the LEA system. So we're framing our recovery primarily around what's happening in terms of student outcomes, because that's what our role is. That's what our regulatory authority is over. But we also have, we're really sensitive and aware of the need for someone to be, taking care of the teachers and the educators, because this is also very rough and tough on them. So we're happy to continue thinking about that and partnering as we move forward. And then again, some students might be doing well. So just some early indications, as I talked about, in terms of that continuum of student engagement or disengagement. Some folks, some teachers and educators, school counselors are reporting increased apathy, like why bother? Really a lower motivation to learn because things are so different now. Clearly a decline in attendance, an increase in truancy. And then those, instead of ghost, I said lost students. There really isn't an official term, but I think at this point we know that we mean students who are no longer showing up, and there has been a minimal, if no, communication despite districts and schools doing their darndest to try and understand what's going on with the student and the family. And then for academic achievement, hearing reports about an increase in frustration, confusion, hearing about students feeling that they have to teach themselves, typically when they're in a remote paradigm, reduced motivation to learn, which obviously has an impact on achievement. There's an increase in the percent of students failing. I saw testimony by the school counselor at Spalding High School who, and I don't have the exact number, but I think it was something like 3 times the number or percent of failing grades for core courses from pre-pandemic to during the pandemic in 2020. Have some ideas about what that's all about that we're happy to talk about as well. Then widened equity gaps, as I talked about, particularly for our historically marginalized students. There was some data actually coming out, very preliminary, that the pandemic may have a worse impact on math than ELA, but it's really very early, and there hasn't really been a lot of replication of that. And it was a study that it wasn't a full population study. It really was, the participants were comprised more of better served students, not historically marginalized students, which we would certainly need to get a good handle on what's happening with them. So the reason I'm saying that is,
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Would that surprise you, given I think some of this, what we've heard historically in the United States, there always is that summer slide with math, more so than ELA.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to do a lot with handle on what's happening. I think it has a lot to do with developmentally where the student is. So I'm concerned about early literacy.
Okay.
But I think it's very possible that math will see the biggest decline.
Mm-hmm.
But it also depends on how we're looking at ELA. So, is it some really nitty gritty core skills? Is it comprehension? Is it, we just have to kind of like dig deeper to find out what's going on. Right. The reason I'm putting this forth is that I think our approach is that we want the districts to actually do their homework on that, to find out like where are the gaps that they're seeing. Is it in ELA? Is it in math? Is it in both? Is it in some other academic areas? So we will be adopting a district level approach. I'm not sure the committee has taken any testimony on Act 173 and the implementation of that work, which from the agency's perspective has been framed around 4 different levers that are a systemic set of core practice, if you will, that really needs to be strong at the district level to make sure that we can continue to implement the kinds of teaching practices, the kinds of supports that are needed for all students to do well in school. So first, the district really needs a coordinated curriculum. For new folks on the committee, it might be surprising to find out that there isn't already a coordinated curriculum in every district, but it's true, there's not. And some places don't even actually have a true curriculum. It's kind of catch as catch can. So what we're actually really advising and supporting and guiding is that, like, at the district level, you have to have a coordinated curriculum. It needs to be coordinated across the different transition points from early years to the school age, elementary years to middle school to high school. It also needs to be coordinated across different classrooms within traditional grades, though, because we know that there's some room for improvement there. The second lever is really bolstering education support teams. So this is a process by which students are identified in some way as struggling, as needing some assistance academically or emotionally. The way they are deployed, the way they function is pretty varied across the state. We would like to see a district level education support team for recovery that will actually allow sort of a one point person to interface with some of the state supports that I'm going to talk about that we want to bring to bear. And that might overlap very well with the money that you're talking about. This all has to be grounded in some kind of data, in some kind of information at hand. And this might be back at the holding the agency accountable piece that you talked about, Senator Campion. We're not requiring that there isn't time to require some robust 3-year-long needs assessment. That's not what we're talking about. But we do want this to be grounded in something beyond just, well, I feel or I think this is what's going on. We want there to actually be some use of what's at their disposal already in terms of a variety of different key indicators, and I can talk about some of those later, to actually build their plan on. And then needs-based professional development. And this this is a different twist on the usual way of thinking about professional development. So it's really thinking about from the perspective of the district, what does the district need in terms of professional development in its educators. Okay.
Can I ask a question before we go on? Senator Campion, thank you. Going back to the district needs, the coordinated curriculum, is this like a beginning of a statewide curriculum? Is this, why would
No.
there not be something that was more statewide?
Well, that is a great question that I'm only, a very small person in the big cog of our local control construct in the state. So I don't think that there ever has been much appetite for a state curriculum. I don't know that there ever would be. So that's not what this is. We want whatever curriculum the LEA is using to just be coordinated across the different entities within its own district. That's really what we're asking for. We're not interested in having a statewide curriculum like something like Texas has, for instance, where they actually come in and say, this is what you will teach from soup to nuts. That's
What
not
we do have, just for clarification for all of us, we have standards.
Yes.
And standards are what all schools need to meet. Curriculum, in a way to think about it, is how that is being met.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that.
Senator Hooker.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator Lyon.
So, I understand we're talking about Act 173, but if we put this into a broader context of trying to resolve some of the issues we're seeing with the pandemic and kids and recovery, then to me, it really makes sense to have some uniform policy for mental health supports and related supports. You talk about the team approach, but I'm a strong believer in having some data informed policies and standards that can be utilized at the local level. So they might be used in a slightly different way at the local level, but we're in a completely different area right now, I think, for a lot of this. We're not talking curriculum. We're talking support services, and we're talking best practice for managing mental health and suicide prevention, and the whole issue around social determinants of health that
Yep.
and I know how strongly educators feel about these things, but it would be helpful to have some strong leadership at the state level for local folks, because I think there are a lot of good people out there. They'll have good intentions, but if you don't give them best management practices for improving mental health for kids, that's just going to be good intentions. So they're my 2 cents.
Yeah, and if I might respond, Senator Lyons, I think it's both. So I think that's why we're, again, framing this in these 3 buckets. So yes, the curriculum is really critical for academic achievement and success, but when you talk about social emotional learning components of a curriculum, it absolutely has to do with ensuring that students are healthy and that their mental health is attended to. Part of the rest of this I'm going to talk about has to do with what our approach is. And we actually are in very close partnership with the Department of Mental Health. And I think it would be great if you had them come in as well. We had actually before the pandemic started some work where we were going to identify what the sort of minimum services are from DA to DA intersecting with the schools across the state, because we know that there are a lot of inequities in terms of what students have access to, what families have access to. So yes, we're framing it around those 4 levers, but I don't think that's the only frame that we're operating with. So we're engaged with some funding improvement, or what's the word I'm looking for? Funding redesign, if you will, for BIs also to help move forward with more systemic solutions. And if I may, what we really are excited about is assigning each LEA its own state team of agency professionals, and that's where we would actually draw from our partnerships with mental health, with DCF, and some other organizations to actually help get that sort of very targeted assistance this spring moving into the summer, so it's ready for the fall. So I think that's more what you might have been alluding to, Senator Lyons, and that's part of what our plan is. So first, though, we need to actually get a sense of what's going on at the local level. Again, not take like months and months. That's not what we're talking about. But we need to get a sense of what are the needs. In some areas, they probably have very robust, well-functioning partnerships with mental health. In other areas, they might not. In some areas, they might need more assistance. In other areas, they might not. For instance, we actually have a SAMHSA grant that's piloting some really great combined work in 3 different school districts, Fairhaven and a couple other in the Rutland area that, probably don't need as many fiscal resources because they've been covered, but can still use some additional assistance in terms of thinking through how best to provide services, which is, I think, part of what you might be getting at. So that was all I had, and I'm very eager to take questions.
Thank you for that, because that was what I was getting at. That's good.
Just a quick question
Please,
before we move on. Can you tell us what SAMHSA is?
Yes, I'm sorry. It is substance abuse mental health services, I think. So it is part of NIH. So it's actually, this is an interesting project, and I'm happy to share more with the committee. So it's actually something called Project Aware, and there was a national SAMHSA Project Aware, which these funds had to be awarded to state agencies of education. So it would be kind of like US DOE saying these monies have to go to your state Department of Mental Health. They were doing like a crisscross because they really wanted to focus on building that bridge between mental health and between education. So we couldn't have gotten it, though. We together went in to get it, Department of Mental Health and Agency of Education. And so we work, side by side on it together. And the whole point is to increase capacity at the LEA level. So increasing school-based clinicians, but also increasing things like mental health first aid training, UMatter, which is a suicide prevention training, and some other types of getting services. It also relaxes the restrictions because there's some more money there, or relaxes some of the restrictions around Medicaid, because that's really where Department of Mental Health, what their world is in terms of funding. And we've done some good work as a state in that already, but there's still more that needs to be done.
So Dr. Boucher, I guess I'm wondering a couple of things, and these don't need to be answered right now. I would like you and Secretary French to come back either tomorrow or Thursday. What do you need from the legislature? I mean, what sorts of policies? I mean, we can put in requests, request all of you to do certain work, but do we actually need to pass legislation on certain areas? And then I need a response to the letter that you've seen the draft of, and Secretary French has seen the draft of, and have you all weigh in on the dollar amounts. I'm still struggling in some regards with the elevator speech of what the Agency of Education is doing to get students ready to roll sort of post-COVID. For example, on the truancy front, I'm not sure what I would tell and I could just be missing it. What is it that the agency is doing to bring those children back into the fold, if you will, this summer? What's the plan there to actually do it? Is there a plan? And what does that look like? And what kind of resources might we need? Since that seems to be one of the most immediate needs of the state.
Yeah, so what we will be doing, there's actually a couple of places just off the top of my head where they're doing really great truancy work.
Great.
So there's a great program in Lamoille County that a group of school districts, small group of school districts, contracted with the Lamoille Center for Justice, I think the name of it is, I might have that slightly wrong, to actually set up a truancy program where they have staff that are right now going out and actually knocking on doors. And sometimes they've made that connection with the families. And so they're sometimes making sure they have diapers. They're sometimes making sure, so
which I think is great. And I'm sorry to interrupt. I think that's great. But are you going to mandate that statewide? In other words, is the Agency of Education, is every senator on this call right now going to be able to go back and say, listen, the Agency of Education is on this truancy situation. They are putting out a requirement for all districts to touch base with those students that have been missing. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to get a sense of.
Yes, because when they do their needs assessment, they're going to have to actually get that information to us. So I'm sorry, I was kind of moving a little bit forward.
No, that's okay. So
what
yes.
we're not going to say is here's how you absolutely have to do it, because that would be
absolutely
right. Here are some good examples. There's also a great example in Addison County that is a great partnership between their DA and a community organization and the schools.
But you are requiring all districts and supervisory unions to do this work.
Yes.
Great.
So I'm sorry if I missed that.
No, you may have gotten it. I may have been the one who missed it. I just need to make sure that I know that I can go to Senate colleagues and say, hey, the Agency of Education is working on this, and it's an important thing people have recognized, and it's in those children who are living, out there that we haven't been in contact with. The agency is directing their educational partners to make sure that those families are being, are having a touch point between now and whenever. That's something we can look to all of you to get back to us on in terms of when this work will be done.
Yes, but I also think that it has to be a community effort. It can't just be on the schools, because it has to actually be a more holistic community coming together piece. So
sure, but I think the schools, you guys, I think have the information. So I think you're all at the point where we need a point person, and it seems to me that you're the ones that we can look to say, in this August, if there's a family out there that still hasn't, gotten the support, or we're going to come back, I think, to you, unless, again, if you need certain things from us to do this work, that's the kind of conversation I'm really interested in having over the next couple of days, so that you do have the resources to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that piece I need to think about, because
okay, great.
We were planning on using the federal dollars that are coming in, and I'm not sure, when you have talked about appropriations in this discussion, what appropriations you're talking about. So if those are CARES Act dollars, I'm not sure. The Education CARES Act dollars have some pretty significant restrictions on how they can be used.
Mm-hmm.
If there are state dollars, the only thing I would, obviously there's more freedom with those. The only thing that I would give a word of caution about is, if we're using state dollars to supplement something that has been before federally funded, that could actually mess up our future ability to use federal funds for that. So,
Sure.
and I'm sure this committee already knows about that. So that's just something I want to kind of throw out there. But I do want to make clear that, so those three different buckets, each district has to report on what's going on, has to figure out what is going on in those, how many students are actually lost, how many students are truant, how many students are anxious, are depressed, are externalizing and need more, more supports than they have had previously. And then the academics, which is the usual.
Any
And I'm
other-
happy to come back and talk about this.
Yeah, no, I think that would be terrific. And if you would also, we'll have Jeannie set up a time tomorrow or Thursday to come back and continue this conversation and respond to, again, we have money. We have, in talking with the chair of approach, there is money there, or there is not money in our letter that you may believe we need to put in. Again, these would be federal dollars directed specifically at reaching out to those families between, and we should probably put a date in there, between now and the end of the academic year, to make certain that children are safe, they're getting what they need, kind of being brought back into the fold of the community. And then we would leave it all to all of you to actually facilitate that with community partners. Seeing no other questions and just looking at the time.
Just
please.
a quick
Yes, Senator Hooker, please.
request.
Yes.
I don't think Dr. Boucher's PowerPoint was up on.
Right, I've not seen it yet either. If you would please submit that. Jay, if you
I think
haven't.
you said you submitted it to Jeannie. Maybe it just hasn't been put up yet. I don't.
Submitted this morning.
Okay.
Suzanne sent it over. Jeannie,
Great.
please let me know if you didn't get it. She sent it way earlier.
The Senator Lyons.
So you mentioned a couple of places where they've had some good results with the work that they're doing. And it would be really terrific to be able to see exactly what the programs are, just what they're doing. So we have an idea of what boots on the ground means. And then that could give us maybe some idea of how much money is involved.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
So and I think I include in that maybe the SAMHSA grant. Maybe we could just look and see what all is included in that, because
I'm happy to provide folks who would probably come in and talk with you about those two particular programs. They're not run by the agency. SAMHSA is,
Right.
but I definitely, if I'm sure both of those entities could do like a half an hour presentation just to let you know what the pieces are. And I know Heather Hobart, who is the director of the Lamoille County, I mean, they have data to actually show that what they're doing really works.
Great.
that'd be great.
Would you mind sending Jeannie and me maybe a name or two from Lamoille and another school district that is really doing great work, and that'll help frame a little bit more of our work.
Yep. Very happy to.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I can also have our crew come in and talk a little bit more about SAMHSA, if that would be helpful for you.
Sure, that would be great.
Again, keep it really tight, but just the real practical, so sort of like what's going on with it.
Terrific.
Happy to do that.
Great. Thanks for being with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back in touch soon.
Great. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great afternoon.
Committee, we've been at it for pushing an hour and 25 minutes. So let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll pick up at 2:45. We'll talk to a couple of after. Holly Morehouse is back with us. And we also have the Boys and Girls Club to help us understand what some of the financial needs might be this summer. So see you in 10. All right, it looks like we're live. So welcome back to Senate Education. It's February 16th, and we have Holly Morehouse with us with Vermont After School Programs. Holly, thanks for joining us. We are, as you know, you've been following our work as it relates to how to prepare young, Vermonters to transition back to school, and their summer opportunities and their after-school opportunities are a big part of that. And you saw, I believe, or heard that we have a letter going to appropriations. I want to give credit to Senator Ballant, who during discussions yesterday felt as though we should put summer programs to the expedited fund, given that parents and programs are going to need to get ready, need to prepare for hopefully an influx, and also let families know that these dollars would be available. And so we put in $500,000, and so anything you can tell us around what what we need to be doing to help folks get ready, what we need to be doing as it relates to that dollar amount, if that's the number we should be sending down the hall, anything along those lines will be helpful. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, and thanks for being here.
Great, thank you so much. For the record, it's Holly Morehouse with Vermont After School, and it's great to be back with this committee again. I was telling the chair that I listened to the live stream this afternoon and changed around the order of my presentation to catch up where you all are. You are way beyond the why summer is important data. So the presentation that I sent to Jeannie, it's the same slides. I just moved that stuff to the end. So you still have that in there, but I have rearranged the order so we can cut to right where I think your conversation is. Senator Campion, is it okay with you if I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So hopefully, you're just seeing the cover slide of the presentation. I have to say, Senator Ballant and all of you making this a priority and thinking about the timing couldn't be more important. I think as a state, we really need to be envisioning summer 2021 as probably the most important for young kids around connection, healing, and learning for both children and youth. And those three words are really, really intentional. There's all the data around learning loss, but there's also the strengthening the community connection, building resilience for youth, getting children and youth together, outdoors, enjoying our Vermont summer, getting through this winter, and being outside again, and then providing opportunities for self-advocacy, exploration, leadership, and so forth. And I really appreciate Senator Perchlik chairing the Universal After School Task Force. I wanted to tag that here as well, because the timing is really important for providing some bridge funding this summer and next school year. The After School for All funds are fully allocated and run out at the end of this year. And the future funding for Universal After School won't be in place yet. So we can't let this, one of the most important summers, sort of fall through the cracks. So your work and that letter that you're working on for appropriations is really, really critical. You've already heard a lot of the data. The other thing that I was noticing in your letter, you talk about access to food. Summer programming hits at that. And actually, we work really closely with Hunger Free Vermont around summer programming, because they have found that the standalone food sites for students or children and youth to go get food don't serve as many. They're not as effective as a summer food program that is incorporated into a summer program, right? So where you have the bridge programming, you provide 2 meals and 2 snacks and so forth, are much more successful. So it's a real strong synergy. So I think by strengthening and focusing on summer programs, you can hit the access to food aspect as well. I also think that if we do summer right, you can hit on the mental health and well-being concerns that Deputy Secretary Boucher was just speaking to and sharing data on, and that you all have been talking about. And I was in here just sharing some more of that same kind of data. I think as a state, we really need to think about what our emphasis is for summer. And I think that we can do all of these things that are listed here. There are working families who need to be able to work and have spent a long time trying to juggle complicated schedules. There is learning loss that we see and we know and can measure. There's this lack of connection, especially around our adolescents and youth. There's the access to food, and there's the mental health and well-being. Really where we are as a community, teachers and schools are often maxed out. I know there are still places that we're trying to get schools back in person across the state. So asking schools by themselves to pick up summer programming may be a challenge in some communities. That said, I would love for some of that reporting that's going back to the Agency of Ed around the district's plans. It would be incredible if the districts could be asked by the agency how they're approaching summer, whether they're running it themselves or are they partnering with someone else in the area, what that looks like. And the reason I say that is because that collaboration between after school programs, summer programs, and the school is really, really important. It's important not just for knowing about access to space, but it's important for how to support children and youth and who needs to work on what and what kind of math or reading program and who can teach it and so forth. If we really want to capture some of that learning loss, or at least stem the tide on learning loss. The other point, I think, around parents and families, they are stretched thin and money is tight. So whatever we set up, making sure, which I think is the intent of your committee, that low income and even middle income children and youth can access the services. And then is also acknowledging that the after school and youth serving field is completely and totally exhausted. Many of them have been running programming in person since March with essential childcare, then over the summer, then with the childcare hubs, and continuing to fill in. So we have a very taxed system at a really important time. So how to leverage those dollars to make sure we can shore up what's currently in place, and then also meet the needs in the underserved areas. Senator Campion, what you said about timing is so important. Any plan we have learned will not succeed if it's not rolled out in time for parents and families to make the plans and to enroll children and youth. And when I'm thinking about a summer program here, what I'd like to propose is that we make sure that every community has at least 5 to 6 weeks of full day programming. There's a lot of research around that. I'm a little bit skeptical of summer programs that don't run full day, that only run for 3 hours or so, because I don't think that they meet the needs of working families, and it causes accessibility issues. Also a little bit concerned about some conversations in some districts about, instead of doing a regular summer program, really focusing on like 2 weeks of tutoring for a subset of kids for partial day. And I understand the draw to that around the learning loss, but I am concerned that if it's only 2 or 3 hours and it's only a couple weeks, that working families won't be able to take advantage of that. You won't have the benefits of the meals, you won't have the mental health, social, emotional learning, and frankly, just the being outdoors in Vermont and hiking and exploring and birding and canoeing and kayaking, which really definitely contribute to youth development, and is what every Vermonter needs this summer. So timing is really critical. If we cannot, usually you start planning for summer in the fall, definitely by January. We're in February. We're really strong and facile, and COVID has taught us to be that way, but we got to do it now. We need to know now that programs are going to happen. We need to know that programs are going to have enough money for staff. We need to know what the issue is going to be with school buildings and whether or not programs can run in school buildings and which ones and so forth. We also need to be getting in place training for staff around social emotional learning, resilience. If non-school staff are going to be supporting learning, they're going to need training and connections to the school day around that. 2020, I'm just bringing this up so that we don't relive this and that we learn from the past. 2020 was a real mixed bag. Capacity was about 50% across the state. There were a number of schools that did not want to run summer, and in fact did not want their buildings to be used, particularly sort of Rutland, Brandon on down, which made it very challenging for programs that normally used a school building. There was also a lot of delay. And I understand with the pandemic, we were all trying to figure out what to do, but there was a lot of delay in figuring out if a program was going to be able to use a building or not, that caused a lot of uncertainty. And when that uncertainty occurs, parents and families look for alternative choices. Some of also what we happened is not only was capacity down, but sometimes where we had a program stood up, we didn't have the demand to meet it because it took too long and parents had gone in a different direction or families had gone in a different direction. So right now, rolling out not only the funding, but some major state messaging the same way that the health department did back at the end of the summer about how important in-person schools were for the elementary school students. I'd love to see and would partner with anybody on this, some really strong state messaging about the importance of summer 2021 and what that means. We're already working with Department of Health on some of that and getting guidance out to programs. So we are moving forward. And the Child Development Division has also been really helpful throughout the process as well.
Ms. Morehouse, may I just interrupt you there?
Yes.
Let's just, so with Department of Health, you're getting the green light to move ahead. You're feeling good about where things will be with vaccinations and safety, things like that.
So far, I was back and forth with the Department of Health last week, really around the guidance, and what they said is they're expecting the guidance for childcare and summer programs to remain similar to last year, maybe with some modifications, maybe around double masks or something like that. But they are expecting programs to be able to run with sort of that same kind of operational look and feel that they had. So yes.
Okay.
This slide here, Senator Campion, is, we last week, when I got your request, we put out a survey to the field to sort of see what they're feeling and thinking. The good news is, so the number of respondents was 74, but it's actually much higher than that in a way, because many of the programs who responded run at multiple sites. So it's one response, but they run at 6, 7, or 10 sites in some cases. So I would say this is maybe half the field sort of coming in and responding. So the good news is, of those who responded, again, granted, this was not a random sample. These are ones who actually, filled it out. 90% are planning on running. What they are waiting for is that guidance. And we did schedule a call right after town meeting day that we're going to do a statewide forum with Dr. Brina Holmes and the Department of Health for the field around the guidance, so they can start to see what the numbers are going to look like, because that guidance really affects staffing and pods and groupings and so forth. There are some that who decided they're not going to run, and some that were sort of, on the fence. My second handout, I did put together the list for all of you by county of what so far in your county has responded, and we will continue to collect data, try to get the other half of the field, and then I can update and send that to you, so you can keep an idea on each of your districts, what it's looking like.
Senator Perslick?
Thank you. Holly, this number 90%, how would that change with funding? Are these people doing it regardless of funding, or they have like 21C or other funding for their programs?
These are people that are trying to run and planning on running, but they haven't figured out necessarily all the funding. So on the right side of the screen is really what they're seeing as the challenges. So over half of them specifically named staff. And this was an open-ended question. It wasn't where you just check off boxes and you can check everything as your concern. So I would say it's an even, it's a high rate over. They're worried about finding staff, training staff, programming ideas, and supporting staff. The number of them brought up, would staff be vaccinated or not? That would help them make sure that, staff felt safe and were safe. They brought out burnout and pay. Over about a third of them are concerned about that access to spaces. They're waiting to hear from schools. And they're also looking, to collaborate with schools, particularly if we want this to be a summer that includes, strongly learning as well, right? And some of that connection. So if we can move forward on, and it doesn't have to be the school that runs it, but if the school can be in conversation or assign someone to be in conversation, or a couple of teachers or something, that would be great. And then health guidance. So where they're talking about the need for funding is increased staffing levels in order to meet the ratios and splitting the kids up and 6 feet apart. Transportation is an issue if they can have fewer kids on the buses like they did last summer. safety and cleaning supplies, some are still asking for, training for staff, supports for staff, especially if they can't do as many field trips and activities as they normally would do out in the community. Running an 8-hour program for 5 weeks, 6 weeks or longer in the heat of summer, not be able to go a lot of places is challenging, right? So, the more that we can send their way around programming and ways to keep, staff morale up and so forth. So funding requests were really sort of in these sort of categories.
Other questions before we move on? Ms. Morehouse. Senator Lyons, I'm sorry.
Okay, so this is really helpful. And I'm looking at your list of the programs that are in either school or community-based. For the school-based programs, are they already built into the school budget or matching funds with community folks? How are they currently funded?
Great question. So,
Holly, could you
depends
increase the font on that a little?
Yes.
This
Does that help?
Yeah, that does help. That's good for me.
It's even bigger. You just have to scroll over. But so for instance, if we look at Chittenden County, since Senator Lyons is from Chittenden County, Burlington School District, this Burlington After School Program, they have a 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant. So they have federal dollars already. There are 100 schools, 100 sites in Vermont that have these federal dollars. They're the only federal dollars that are solely for after school and summer. When I look at our landscape and try to paint a picture, there are some parts of our state where 21C school run programs are really strong. Franklin County, Franklin Northwest, Swanton area, Enosburg, Richford, they all have multiple sites, 5 to 8 different schools. North Country schools across the top, I think there's 10 sites that are all funded by 21C. The Sharon, Tunbridge area, One Planet program has 8 to 10 sites down there as well. So we have some strong multi-site systems that are funded through these federal dollars and run by schools. So that would be the case for the Burlington After School program as well. They have funding for all of their 9 schools. However, we have parts of the state that receive 21C funding, such as Wings down in Whitingham, that actually didn't run last summer, got a grant to run a childcare hub in the fall and then turned it down and then actually stopped running their after school programming. So just because they're a 21C program doesn't actually mean that they're going to fill that full comprehensive need. There's another one in the Catch program. It's Lindenville area that's 21C funded, but they don't have summer as part of their programming, part of the grant. So right now, if you look on the list, they might run, but it's not going to be with their 21C dollars. So it's not a requirement in Vermont that you run that way. Then you have players like Essex Junction in Chittenden County, where it's the Parks and Recreation Department that does all of the after school and summer programming. And if you remember with the childcare hubs, they partnered really closely with the district to be able to offer the childcare hubs at no cost for parents. So that's a really nice, tight relationship between the Parks and Rec and the school district. In Rutland, since some of you are from Rutland, Rutland has a 21C program at the elementary and middle schools in Rutland City. But because the schools decided not to open last summer, it was Rutland Parks and Rec that actually ran the summer programming instead of Tapestry through the schools over the summer, and also ran the child care hubs. So it really, because we are so local control, even in our federal grants, there is a lot of variation. The other players, when I sort of paint the picture of the state, where, the YMCAs play a big role in many parts of the Burlington YMCA around Chittenden County and some into Franklin County, the Meeting Waters YMCA down in Brattleboro, is really important, and Putney. Those are important places. There is a 21C grant down there, but it's only at the middle school. And in Bennington, that northern Massachusetts YMCA crosses over. So there is a real mix of funding.
So, thank you. That's very helpful. So it doesn't look like one size fits all. And then in terms of funding, there are going to be many individual differences and needs. I'm trying to figure out the sustainability of this kind of after school program. Let me ask, you've touched on some of my keen interests here. And so I'll just list what they are, and then whether we talk about them today, I don't know. But one is the link with businesses and how chambers of commerce may or may not be engaged in supporting these efforts. I never get a straight answer on that, but I don't expect you can answer for businesses, and all businesses right now are stretched thin, but there are some that have done pretty well. And we're always hearing from chambers and businesses about workforce development and how important childcare and child camps and summer camps are, how important they are. So that's one. The other one is the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, and whether or not you've reached out to them to engage them in any summer programming that might be slightly different from what they have done in the past. And so I did mention the Chamber, the Business Link. Then the other one I think is really fascinating, and I don't know what authority the state has over this because it's all locally determined, but not allowing for the use of a school building is something I think maybe we should talk about. It seems to me that if someone's putting together a program or an organization, I mean, I've done business plans for childcare programs and other programs that are run in public buildings or in private buildings. And I just wonder what authority, if any, we have to open up some of those schools and just say they shall be made available. That would be like...
That's a great question.
Yeah. So, it's always bothersome when I hear that. It doesn't mean that... I know there's always insurance and liability and everything else, but there certainly are a significant number of schools that do allow for it. But
No.
Anyway, that's a little bit of some questions I have, and I can't begin to say how really outstanding your work has been in this area. I'm talking with Holly now. Thank you for your good work.
Thank you. I want to hit the school building one because I would love to have those open. I do realize that it's often for schools, if they're not used to partnering with after school or summer, working around cleaning schedules, like schools often see that as a time to do like cleaning and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. It can be overcome, right? It's that collaboration. So once again, I would love to see, any dollars that we put forward, really, whatever way we can encourage that school collaboration with community partners or, with the after school program, sometimes which is run by the school, that still has to negotiate those things. That's really important. And in many communities, the school building really is the only building. Going back to businesses, two parts of the answer. Part of the after school and summer field are private businesses, right? That are like childcare or for-profit or a gymnastics place that's running a business and not running programming and so forth. Part two, which is out throughout Chittenden South Supervisory Union, is a for-profit business childcare center that's in a number of communities. it's part of the landscape. It does sometimes bring up questions if we're going to put dollars forward, right, to lower costs. How do we make sure the dollars actually, benefit families and lower the costs and provide scholarships and so forth in those sort of mixed delivery systems. As far as businesses that are not part of the youth serving field, we haven't seen a lot of them come forward to bring this on. The place where I thought we might see more was around the childcare hubs when the funding was there to start up. But even hospitals who were very interested in having care on site really didn't want to run programming themselves. Sometimes they had a room, but they wanted somebody, the Y or a community partner or somebody to run the programming. So that seemed to be kind of the place where that got stuck. And transportation, sometimes is a challenge, it's particularly for after school. If it's if the after school program is not on site at the school, how to get the children and youth there can be a problem. And the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps is great. We consider them one of the 400 or 500 programs across the state that are serving youth, and that variety in programming is also really important. I think for some of those things that you were speaking about earlier with Deputy Secretary Boucher about how you reach children and youth, right? And some of them, a certain type of programming, robotics or something might really speak to them, and another one, we need a completely different angle. And the beautiful thing about after school and summer is that we can provide a lot of different angles, right? We don't have all the children and youth sitting in the same classroom for the same amount of time. We can really spread out and do some of that. So having the Vermont Conservation Corps in this conversation is great.
Ms. Morehouse, I'm just wondering are there areas that we really need to be focused on that have a deficit of kinds of summer programs that kids might need to be enrolling in?
Yes, we do. Barry, Canaan, Champlain Islands, Pulteney, Bennington, there's individual communities that don't have, and I guess when I'm thinking in this conversation, I'm thinking about that comprehensive summer program, right? That's going to run for the full day and the weeks and is going to do swim lessons and field trips and food and learning and social emotional learning and all those things. So there's a number of smaller things, for instance, in Bennington that a lot of arts programs in particular come to mind down in Bennington that will run programming for a smaller set of kids. But I think having an option that is also multiple week for the same, if we want to hit learning loss, it needs to be the same children every week on a consistent basis. They can't go for 1 week and then move on. We're not going to have any learning gains there. Same with access to food and so forth. So there's definitely that piece of it. So I think there's three parts to that. There's places like I just mentioned where there isn't anything like that I can point to where there's an option that's low or free that provides comprehensive programming. So we have places like that. Then we have places like Essex that's running programming, but typically has a long waiting list, right? So we have places where you can't get in your area. And then we have places where I think that they could expand if we could help with the funding, right? To add some staff and also the messaging, right? There's no czar of summer, right? There's no who says this is what you have to run. So we really have to work our messaging on what works and what's best practice and how do we run it. So,
Yep.
Those would be kind of my three buckets.
So I want to help move this along a little bit because we do have another witness after you. And what I'm wondering, a couple of things. Does the $500,000 make sense in terms of an amount? How is it distributed? And then should there be something in there for for programs to access to start up this summer, to pay for what you're talking about, the beefing up of faculty and staff? And then thirdly, what are we going to get from this? What is it? What are you going to come back and say, hey, you guys knocked it out of the park, or we were actually $500,000 short? You know, what are the kinds of things that how will young people benefit from those things?
Great questions. So I have two proposals around the funding at the bottom of the slide. One, I just named Summer Connection Grants, and that's to really build up the existing infrastructure. And then the second component I called Summer Partnership Expansion Grants, which really, Senator Campion, is what you were saying about starting from scratch someplace. The Summer Connection Grants, I was envisioning grants to existing, you know, some of those programs that we saw on that list that need to add staff, they need to add busing, you know, they're pretty good at running, but they've got these gaps, and under COVID and this year, it's really important. Or maybe they want to hire 2 school day teachers to really support literacy and math. So I'm envisioning there grants of like 5,000 to 20,000. So I just averaged 10,000 a program across 150 programs. It's 1.5 million. And then I put some proposed requirements, which you all could play with, or our grant oversight committee would play with, you know, that programming should be low or no cost to parents who qualify, 5 days a week, at least 5 weeks, 8 hours a day, providing healthy snacks and meals, integrating SEL and STEM, outdoor activities, and using qualified instructors. And I think these are the components that would help get us all those outcomes that we talked about up front. And then keeping the funding flexible. So if it's for a bus or staffing or supplies or enrichment or paying for training, I think is important, because those programs have existing budgets, have money for some things and not others. And so this would allow them to be able to tell us what they most need. And as Senator Perchlik said, we have an existing program called After School for All that's run through the Agency of Human Services, that has a structure in place, has a grant oversight committee that could put together a funding proposal, an application, and have people apply, and we could get this money out pretty quickly.
Great.
The second component is the expansion. I worked with the Wallace Foundation, put together a cost calculator, and I spent some time this weekend playing with a lot of different numbers. For a program that serves about 50 kids for 6 weeks, full day, it's about $50,000. If parents aren't paying anything, if there's no school money, like that's just from scratch. You have nothing. So this second proposal, if you wanted to do 50 of those, that number, the 2.5 million, probably could be lowered if there's existing funds or matching or other dollars. But this gives you, if you're talking about blank slate, if they serve only 30 kids, it's about $33,000 to run a 6-week program. If they serve 200 kids, a big size program, it's about $144,000. So there are some economies of scale for large programs, but most of our programs, I'd say, fit within that like 50 kid range. So about $50,000. I'd put similar kind of requirements on this, you know, to get the kind of outcomes that we want to get, and could run through a similar process. The key will be doing it quickly, so that they can let families know and get students signed up. And the challenge will be, you know, working with the schools to make sure the students who most need to be there are there, and that they know what they need to be working on, and there's some collaboration there.
That's great. That's a huge help. Senator Lyons.
Quick question, short answer. I don't want to hold us up. In looking at the, you said you looked at a specific organization or site to put this together. Are there any projected savings that come out of this during the school year? So what is the benefit that we see both? I know obviously we'll see a social benefit and maybe an academic benefit, but are there cost savings associated with this within the school system itself? And by that, I mean, not just reductions, but a decreased rate of increase. Is there anything like that around there?
Yeah, so
Right.
there are some return on investment studies just on after school in general that were done pre-COVID. And those, you know, are anywhere from, you know, $2 to $3 for every dollar you invest. I think these dollars, and we could work on something for you, and I could try to put something together and get it back to you. I think these dollars are going to have even stronger payout because of the learning loss that happened at the end of last school year, then over the summer with hardly anything, and now hybrid and remote learning, right? So if we're seeing that decline in student learning, not allowing it to continue for another 10 weeks or whatever this summer, right? And to start to remake some of those gains. In a normal summer, teachers reteach stuff from the previous year, right? For 8 weeks or something. I can't even imagine next fall what they're going to be reteaching. But if we can reach those children and youth now, and not only those who are struggling, but also just the whole re-engage, right? And re-entry and connection and learning and all those mental health pieces that we were, you know, pointing to that data as well. I'm not sure how to put a number on that.
Yeah.
But I do know that effective summer programs address all of those things.
That's a great point, Senator Lyons, and something that I'll also put into the letter, just reminding folks, and that, you know, this is an investment up front, but it's also savings. It's a great point. Committee, any final questions? This has been incredibly helpful. Unless I hear from Senator, what I'll do is take these recommendations, incorporate them into a new draft, and get that ready to share with all of you tomorrow. Senator Hooker.
Just curious to know how much 21C money we have in this, you know, in the state. And where would we get that?
It's about $6.5 million for school year and summer.
Okay, and if an entity gets a 21C grant, is that likely to fund a whole program? Does it vary, you know, parts of a program?
It varies. When they first receive the grant, right, they make a proposal and they receive 100% of the grant funding that they're awarded for the first 3 years. And then in year 4, it's reduced by 10%. In year 5, it's reduced by 25%. And after year 5, it's at 50%. And most of the programs that are operating with 21C funding, almost all, now that I think about it, right, wrote their grants pre-COVID. So even though there was some flexibility in how and when they can use their dollars, because there was a lot of things about what was school hours and non-school hours, but that kind of got straightened out. Their grants necessarily aren't larger to meet these additional needs. So I would include 21C funded programs in this funding program where they could apply for the bus or the thing that they need to really make their programs work this summer.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And the Agency of Ed can share tons more on 21C as well.
Right. So we're going to leave it there. We have one more witness and we have a hard stop a little bit before 4. We will have you continue to follow our work. You can please, Ms. Morehouse, look at the next draft when it comes out. Feel free to come back in, weigh in, and I know when our recommendations get to approach, you'll likely have a visit there as well. But this has been incredibly helpful, and I looking around and seeing heads nodding, this is the kind of investment that I think we all hope that we can make this year. Great, thank you. Committee, let's just take a 5-minute stretch, and then we'll, Mr. Wolpe, you'll be joining us. Great, thank you very much. 5 minutes.
Senator Campion, do you have a chairs meeting at 4 today?
We do.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Senate Education. Just following up on Senator Chittenden's question about town meeting week, when we won't be meeting, we are hopefully going to find out when crossover is. That date will be set, I think, Friday. But the last I heard, it's looking like maybe March 12th or March 19th. So still a good amount of time. Mr. Wolpe, welcome to Senate Education. Thanks for being with us. It was good to hear from your organization. You are muted, just so you know. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and saying why you are interested in sharing with us information about the Boys and Girls Club as it relates to some of the legislation that we're looking at.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I always like talking about Boys and Girls Clubs.
Great.
My name is David Wolpe. I'm the Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Club of Rutland County. I am actually fairly new to the position, believe it or not. I moved here 900 miles in the middle of the pandemic in early August. So mostly I'm here to talk about summer learning loss and how it's been enhanced or negatively enhanced through COVID. And, you know, I just listened to Holly's presentation, which is not surprising that it was very comprehensive. So as she gave you a picture of the entire after school network across the state, I guess what I'm going to do or try to do is give you an example of how that might work in one particular instance, and specifically how funding can enhance that and what it is that Boys and Girls Clubs across the state can do. So not only am I the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club in Rutland, I also represent the Boys and Girls Club Vermont Alliance, which I'm a board member of. And there are 5 organizations, you probably know that, in Brattleboro, Burlington, Montpelier, Rutland, and Vergennes. We serve kids ages 6 to 18. Some of the clubs will actually serve 5-year-olds, but traditionally Boys and Girls Clubs is a 6 to 18-year-old. Our primary focus is on school-age kids, but we like to do a lot of teen programming as well. Last year in Vermont, we served 8,000 children. And what that means is not just members in clubs, but also what we call community outreach. And that is when we do special events and we have non-members participate, or you might run a special program in a school that's not what you normally do. So 8,000 kids, and of those 8,000, 50% qualify for free or reduced lunch. A third of them come from single parent households. And last year, the 5 Boys and Girls Club organizations were able to pass out at no charge 100,000 meals or snacks. That was in 2020. So despite all of the difficulties, we still are able to do that kind of thing. The Boys and Girls Clubs remains a great vehicle for basic human needs. So summer learning loss, I don't really need to go into a lot of that. You know the basics of it. In a normal year, a student might fall 2 months behind in math. If you come from a low-income family, it might even be worse. And we don't know this yet, but I'm pretty sure we can all comfortably say that COVID is only going to make those statistics more dramatic. So we have this achievement gap, we have a learning gap, and then I guess we have what I'm thinking of as kind of a normal life gap. Holly addressed this a little bit. Kids just need to get back to leading normal lives for a change and sort of feeling like normal people. And I think all of that, including summer learning loss, are kind of wrapped together in summer programming, or at least all of those needs can be addressed in summer programming. So the Boys and Girls Clubs of Vermont, we want to commend the Vermont School Boards Association, the NEA, the Principals Association, the Superintendents Association, all of them for developing principles to guide re-engagement of students, and they address the student mental health needs and support their academic success. And these are all part of, as I just said, kind of the same picture. So the Boys and Girls Clubs just want to add their voice into those as feeling like these are really critical times and critical issues to address. So one of the things we say at Boys and Girls Clubs is great futures start here. And so out of school time is a really critical part of kids' lives. You know, when I grew up, I didn't worry about out of school time. My parents had adults in my life that took care of me. Probably most of you guys grew up like that too. But as we all know, that's really not the case in most households these days. As time progresses, there is a greater need for out of school time. There's a greater need of adults in kids' lives in roles that were traditionally filled by parents. So we're role models, we're food providers, but but mostly we do, Boys and Girls Clubs has what they call the 5 key elements of positive youth development. And one of those is opportunities and expectations. So opportunities is what I really want to talk about, because opportunities can come in big and small varieties. For example, it might be an opportunity that you get a healthy breakfast first thing in the morning on a summer day that you may not have gotten at home. But we could also provide an opportunity like helping you write an essay on a college application. So it's a wide variety of opportunities that Boys and Girls Clubs offers. And it comes in both everyday life and trying to strive for academic excellence. So what happens is COVID, of course, makes all of these things a whole lot worse. And mostly I'm kind of talking about little kids now, but let's think about teens as well. We know that, they suffer from being alone more. We have more depression, more loneliness. Cyberbullying is always an issue. So these things are just all accentuated. So what we need to offset that is a lot more engagement. And that's not really a magic word, but I kind of use it to mean that kids want to be in your program. They're not there because they have to be. They're there because this is where they've chosen to be, and they like it, and they like you, and you offer them structure and guidance. We've already mentioned meals. You offer them physical activities. And then opportunities, again, get mixed into that. You offer them things that they would not otherwise get. And then to get back to the idea of summer learning loss, we offer them education. But then we get to another one of the 5 key elements of positive youth development, which is fun. So no kids are going to want to line up to be in a classroom all summer. So what do you want to do? You want to teach them in a way that maybe they don't even realize they're learning. They just get engaged and they're excited about it. So there's a lot of ways Boys and Girls Clubs do that. Today, I want to focus on a very specific nationally developed program called Summer Brain Gain. Now, this is a really good program. It can it has an academic element, but it also, when you incorporate it into a full day of programming, it just is part of this entire picture that I'm trying to paint for you. So what Summer Brain Gain can do is it can, it's aligned with national standards. It's a very high quality program. It's engaging. It is flexible. You heard from Holly all sorts of different programs. Well, Summer Brain Gain can work its way into lots of different kinds of programs. It helps sustain learning in club members. It is developmentally appropriate. It is a project-based program, so every week it's a different project, and it's also, the entire program is research-based, so it is proven to have impact. And I don't really want to read to you, but I want to give you one quick statistic that in 2015, a rigorous evaluation designed as a randomized control trial was conducted by Boys and Girls Clubs of America and Metis Associates. Youth participants experienced no significant losses in early literacy, math, or reading, and in fact, there was a notable increase in math for members at Summer Brain Gain sites. So it's not the solution to all of this, but it clearly has a very positive impact. And it is something, it's, as I say, one of many examples of what Boys and Girls Clubs can do to offset these issues. So to paint a little clearer picture, I'll talk about this in terms of what we're going to do in Rutland. The things that we've done specifically for this summer to increase access and just to address these issues, we're expanding our hours. So we want to be available for parents all day long. If they need all day care, we're going to be open from 7:30 until 5:30. We are going to try to add a second location. This goes back to this notion of, can we get a school open in the summer? Well, that's going to be my next project, to see if we can have one of our schools open and with kids in the summer. We want to have a much bigger marketing push, not so much to promote our own programs, but to address this notion of awareness and people just having access to programming. And then what we want to do, again, because kids have been indoors a lot more than they might be otherwise, we want to offer a second choice. So each week, children could pick between their normal club programming, which would be indoors and recreational. They would do some outdoor stuff. Well, we're going to offer what we're going to call an adventure club, where they're going outside every day and they're going to be hiking and swimming, and just Vermont offers a lot of good options for that. So we plan to take full advantage of that. And a child doesn't have to do that for the entire summer. They could switch back and forth all week. So I want to take those two ideas and then connect it back to this program, Summer Brain Gain, to give you an idea how you could still run a program like that, even though you're taking kids out and about every day. You can stop, say, mid-morning and have an hour break where you all sit down and you have a slightly academic session, but you're out in the middle of the wilderness. There's no reason why you can't actually do that. And you can just mix it into a day that's otherwise very engaging. And it's not like a child is actually, in school in the summer. You could also have a very rigorous, 3 or 4 hours of a summer academic enrichment program, and in clubs that I've worked with in the past, you can do that. But you want to have a nice wide variety, and clubs really specialize in that. So I want to get, and I know you've been here all day, so I want to get right to the point. And you asked the question earlier of Holly, what are we going to get out of this? Or maybe in another way to ask it, what is it that we need as after school providers or out of school time providers? Well, I've said it multiple times. I will say it one more time: more access. And more access to me means lower cost and more transportation. There's probably lots of other ways we could talk about it, but the state subsidizes low-income families, and that works out well. But I think there's kind of a missed group in the middle that maybe could need help, particularly if there is a weekly fee involved. And then access, as Holly pointed out, there's just a lot of places that are not being served. And we have 4 clubs. If we want to serve all of those kids, the only way we're probably going to be able to do it is to transport them to our one central club. So that's one of the big parts of what we need. And then it increased or enhanced partnerships between school systems and out of school time or summer providers like the Boys and Girls Club. And we want this to really be addressed on a long-term basis. You've already talked about this. Schools have all sorts of assets that can be used for out of school time, and that's essentially what that point is about. And then lastly, to leverage federal funding such as ESSER 2 or other funding sources to support programs and to provide greater access, because I think really what we need right now is more kids engaged in this exact kind of thing to start to offset not just normal summer learning loss, but this extra need that we have this year. And I wanted to close by addressing one last point that it is brought out in our mission statement, which is always one of my favorite things. And our mission statement is to enable all young people, especially those who need us most, to reach their full potential as productive, caring, and responsible citizens. And the part of the mission statement that that's kind of my favorite and what people always pick out is this phrase, especially those who need us most. And what I wanted to propose to you is this year, that's just about everybody. There is such a need to come back together, to re-socialize, to get back to a normal lifestyle, particularly for children, that Boys and Girls Clubs are poised to take a leading role in that. And as Holly just said, you as the Senate from the state can really make this a lot more doable and a lot more feasible for places that are trying to fix these problems every day. So thanks a lot, and I'm happy to talk about any of those points in more detail.
Terrific. Thanks so much. You have 2 senators from your county on here. You may know Senators Terenzini and Hooker. And so they may have specific questions. Also, any other senator have any questions on what I thought was very informative and interesting testimony? Senator Hooker.
Thanks. David, do you have a place in mind for your second location yet?
The Fairhaven Elementary School
Okay.
is where we're going to, hopefully they're not listening in and they're going to find out I'm going to ask them that.
Didn't you have kind of a satellite program there in the past?
We do. We have a club there all school year, and we also have one nearby in Castleton Elementary. And so we just think Fairhaven is the most feasible because we have one of our staff runs the summer rec program, and we can tie in with other summer things going on there, and it just seems like a good opportunity for us.
Thanks.
Senator Perschlick.
Thank you. One of the things that I didn't ask Holly because we were running out of time there, but at the end of the discussion, we talked about other benefits of these out-of-school programs. I didn't know if you're in your experience in your programs had, done.
Senator
Perschlick, work on
you're freezing, Senator Perschlick. We're just getting. I don't want to speak for Senator Perschlick, but I think he's getting at perhaps the saving and the investment. Senator Perschlick, are you there? Mr. Wolpe, do you want to say a word about this savings, from the investment? I think that might have been where he's heading.
I guess I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. I'm happy to address it.
I was thinking, and this might not be the direction that Senator Perschlick's going in, but I thought he might have been leaning in the way that Senator Lyons sort of had gotten us thinking. Wait, Senator Perschlick, are you back with us? I see that summer photo up. So one of the things Senator Lyons had brought up was, this is going to be a solid investment this summer, and it sounds like, of course, this is also on the other end going to be saving us some dollars because we're making this kind of investment. And I don't think there's anything really to add or to say to that, unless in some ways you're disagreeing with it.
Well, I could say this, which is related, not precisely, but the issue of sustainability has come up, and obviously you want to make wise investments in out of school time programs. So the Boys and Girls Clubs have all been around for quite a while, and they're not likely to go anywhere anytime soon. I don't know, because I'm newer to the state, I don't know like the longevity of any specific club, but I know they've all been here for a while. I know this one has been here for well over a decade. And I think they're very worthwhile investments. One of the things that I want to work on is not just expanding because we've come through COVID, but just to be able to serve more. Boys and Girls Clubs are growing all over the country, and that's one of the reasons I was excited about coming to Vermont, to be honest with you, is there's a lot of room to expand these.
Great. Well, we appreciate you coming here today, and we, as you know, are going to continue this work, and we look forward to having you back. Welcome to Rutland County. Welcome to Vermont. And committee, I think we are going to have to leave it there for today. Tomorrow, I will hopefully have a new draft with some of these revisions in it. Additionally, we're taking up Senator Terenzini's bill on dyslexia, and also continuing our conversation with the agency on a number of different fronts. So with that, unless I see pressing questions or comments,